Records are broken routinely, and the 5 warmest years in global record have all come in the 2010s. Globally, we are now 1 degree above the pre-industrial average temperature and heading fast for 1.5 degree. Climate change is creating millions of climate refugees globally and impacting with devastating consequences on the lives of millions more. And it's also threatening our Earth's biodiversity and accelerating the 6th great extinction event in the history. The numbers don't add up for those advocates of continuing fossil fuel exploration. We cannot globally burn the proved reserves of oil, gas or coal and hope to reach the Paris targets of under 2 degrees temperature rises. This bill is a first step, but only a first.
The second point I want to make is that the bill makes a positive contribution to national and international climate obligations, some of which we've undertaken off our own bat, not at the behest of anybody else. And the national policy position, you can see there, an aggregate reduction in carbon dioxide emissions of at least 80% compared to 1990 levels by 2050. That is our own national target. And that is a target which has to guide our policy. But it's also one which is guided by our international obligations under the Paris Agreement. And that Paris Agreement has the status of an international treaty. And we're obliged to actually conform with the objectives of that Paris obligation. And in terms of doing that and keeping our warming below 2 degrees, you can see from the diagram on the next page that we have to have 50% decarbonisation globally by the 2030s. We have to move to 100% decarbonisation sometime around the middle of this century. The bill, of course, won't itself achieve this, but nevertheless the bill will encourage, I believe, energy security based on renewable energy technologies.
40 years. Now, if you have companies or the department sitting on licences for another decade on top of that, what you're actually talking about is ignore Paris, ignore the idea that we have to move to carbon-free energy by 2050, ignore the fact that the planet is burning up and that all of the destruction to the habitat and the humans on it is happening. And this is what I'm trying to tease out here, is that there's like a bury your head in the sand and pretend it's not happened. It's business as usual, and that is why this bill is before the House. It cannot be business as usual.
The state's management to gas and oil. The first big problem with how the state manages resources is the choice of regime. We have a licensing system through which the state that owns the gas and oil grants licences and authorises oil companies to conduct exploration and production activities. If hydrocarbons are discovered and produced, ownership of these resources are transferred from the state to companies in exchange for a pre-agreed return. So these licensing systems reflect a neoliberal ideology in terms of the privatisation of resources and a relaxed attitude towards state management. Under Ireland's regime, companies are under no obligation to sell produced gas and oil back to the state, and if they choose to do so, it is at full market prices. The Irish licensing regime for gas and oil does not guarantee security of supply. If oil is produced offshore Ireland, companies are not obliged to sell resources to the state. The oil can be transported in tankers to other countries.
Well, yeah, but I think I've learned a lot from here today, because it's quite clear to me, although from a lot of reading and from reading the various submissions, I suspected that the industry and the representatives and the captains of the oil and gas industry have their head in the sands and don't really get it, that the environment and the planet is in serious trouble, and therefore we have to move rapidly and decisively to change in the way we do business. It's been really proven here to me this evening with the question and back and forth that is actually the case. They don't get it, they want to continue with business as usual, and they're prepared to put the profits that their companies make before the interests of the planet and its people.